So.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. It's 9 a.m., Thursday, May 6, 2021. This is a Fort Myers Beach Management and Planning session. All members of the council are present, town manager, town attorney, town clerk, and members of the public. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have a few unexpected guests here this morning, so we'll see if we can't put them on first and get a little update here, and then we'll move on to the agenda. I see Kay and Rob are both here. Are you here to give us an update on the workings of the street and so forth? Rob, Kay, anybody?
Rob Phelan for the record. You should have received a copy of the monthly update that we provide to the town. I guess last month you had asked for somebody to be present at this meeting rather than just the update, so I guess we're here to answer any questions that you might have.
This meeting or our regular meeting, but either way, does anybody have any questions for Rob?
I do have a couple questions, Rob. Thank you for being here this morning. I wondered if the monthly updates are great, but they're very granular. Could you give us sort of a 10,000-foot look at the project? In other words, a couple of the big questions that we hear are we still on track to finish by the end of the year? And again, particularly on the south end of the island, you guys are working on the bay side of the street for sidewalks and so forth. And at what point do you switch over and do the other side for sidewalks? Just give us sort of a broader overview of the next 6 months as you see it for the project, if you can.
Well, we're still working towards that schedule. Ideally, we'll be finished by the end of the year. I think there'll still be maybe some stuff lingering on into the early part of next year. As with any construction project, it's kind of on there. Are moving along fairly well with the production on the northbound side, the bay side of the project. I think Darren Brown is from Christel Construction. He's here. He's able to talk more on the schedule aspects of things, but I think next week, Darren, you said there's probably going to be some paving activity going on in front of the Santini Plaza area, that portion of the roadway, and shortly after that, they anticipate flipping the traffic over to the set so that they can start construction on the beach side in the area from essentially Albatross south to the Santa Maria area, Bay Beach Lane area. So they'll start the construction on the beach. At the end of this month, they'll be.
When you say starting, I mean, that'll begin to work on it to clear the area, then start putting in the sidewalks.
Yeah, they'll start removal of the asphalt, and they'll start the road construction and installation of the curb and sidewalk and drainage structures.
Serious question. In front of Santini Plaza, there used to be a hand railing that kind of kept folks out of the street. Is the railing concept still going to happen, or I don't even have a preference. I'm just curious as to what the plan is.
No, the hand railing in that area was because there was a retaining wall there and there was a drop off into the ditch. In order to get the sidewalk in through that section when they built it back in the, had to install a section of retaining wall in order to maintain the drainage flow through. That section will not have that handrail in that area. There are some sections that may require retaining wall at the back side of the sidewalk where a handrail will be installed, and then also where we have a number of small drainage structures, we do have short sections of handrail. You can actually see that in the segment between Mound Road and Albatross. You can see areas where there's some handrail each side.
Again, for us lay people, explain the purpose of the handrail today. Then, why is it utilized today when it wasn't? I understand why it wasn't before. It was before, but why is it utilized today?
So in some areas we have to use a retaining wall in order to fit some of our drainage structures in, and the handrail is a drop-off protection so that a pedestrian doesn't tumble off the wall. So when the height gets too high, we need to protect that drop-off.
Any other surprises that you all have found as you move to the southern end?
Daily?
Anything worth mentioning?
Which daily?
No, I mean, we've come to expect a lot of surprises, and we've significantly out of the norm for this.
There's certainly no lack of effort on the south end. We're seeing tremendous activity, so I appreciate your efforts.
Anything else?
I see they're still working on the pavers, taking them up, putting them down, moving slowly south. Is there an expected end date to when? And it seems like it's just sections. Is there a reason why they're doing? Are they sinking? Is it?
So some of the pavers, we were experiencing some chipping on them. And what they're doing now is they're going through and they're removing the isolated pavers that are chipped. So they may take out one or two in a location and put a couple of new pavers back in. That's part of their final punch-out activity that the contractor's doing before they turn over the work that they've completed. Money for me.
Thank you.
Bob, you may not know the answer to this because it's a Lee Tran issue, but I've noticed that pads have been put in at stops, but there are still no benches, even in areas that are been completed for a while.
I can't answer that.
Have an idea?
I would expect that Lee Tran would be following through after we finish the
They
project.
just did a big announcement that they were putting up new shelters, but the list didn't include any on the beach.
Yeah, I believe that was a federally funded project that they had on 41. They, just like everybody else, they find projects and they, based on the funding that they have.
They're completely separate from you as far as when they put in the benches and.
Correct.
Do you know anything about that?
One last question for Kay. Last time you were here, Kay, we talked about your firm putting together sort of an overview of all the wonderful things that have happened for the island.
Come on up, Kate, please.
And give particularly as we've had a rate increase for both water and stormwater, I thought it would be helpful for the residents to have a sense of all the good things that are happening and the bang they're getting for their buck. Just curious as to the status of that.
Yes, Kay Molnar. We put something together. I've been working on it with Christy. As you know, Christy is out right now, so we're just working on finalization of that.
Great, thank you. I'd encourage you to you've got some great lists and email lists and just to help get the word out, because if we don't tell our story, nobody's going to tell our story.
Absolutely.
So I think we have a great story to tell. Thank you.
I have to tell you, a week or two ago, we had a terrific storm down here midday, you may recall, right before the lunch hour, about 11:30. I was coming north up on the boulevard, and there was cloud to ground lightning all over the island and so forth, and the rain was coming down probably a couple of inches per hour, and it was just gushing on that boulevard, and it was finding its way to those drains and going right down into those drains. When I drove back an hour later, the boulevard was as dry as a bone. So there's the testament to the project.
I can tell you that even after Hurricane Irma, the very first texts I got, and this was just when segment 1 was done, and all it said was, "It works." So,
And it does.
appreciate
Not about
it.
it. Anything else for the county or Kay? Thanks for coming down, appreciate it. See you next time. Keep up the good work. Okay, move on. First item is the preliminary budget discussion of headcount and equipment. Roger, you want to start us out on this?
Yes, so welcome to the 2022 budget season kickoff, I guess. Myself and the finance department and the department directors and staff will be working very hard over the next couple of months to put the budget together. What we wanted to start today was a process whereby we share with you that our current outlook for the current fiscal year, and I think you're all well aware of the challenges with respect to that. I'll let Craig speak to it, but based on my review of the numbers, it looks like we're not going to have over expenditures or excess revenues, at the 6-month mark, it looks like we're kind of tracking okay to be in balance for the most part. We're hoping we'll do better, and that will generate some carryover money for the add-on list for next year for you to consider some additional initiatives and services for the public if you deem them to be appropriate. So I'm sharing with you today that, it's our intention to basically, for all intents and purposes, keep the staffing stable in terms of the number of staff, the pieces of equipment, which are sort of the two bigger items in our operating budget versus, sort of the paper and the pencils and that stuff is a smaller percentage cost than those other two items, personnel and equipment. So we have that list for you, and it's our intention to stay stable there. So, notwithstanding any specific questions that you have, we wanted to encourage you to bring forward any initiatives that you're considering or would like to consider for fiscal 22. So that we can price them out, and we can, to the best of our ability, if there's a consensus on council for them to be included, to build them in with the existing millage. I think I haven't spoken to everybody, but I could probably guess that everyone's intention is to try to hold the millage at the current line. That would be our intent. And so it's identifying any enhancements or initiatives and seeing if we can build those in existing millage. That's what we'll be working very hard on over the summer. I don't know if we provided some financial information and information in the kit for you. I don't know if you have any specific questions or you just want to sort of go into the initiatives.
Just have a couple quick questions, Roger, and maybe these are better for Craig, particularly on the statement of revenue summary. I'm not sure what page, I've got a hard copy here, so I'm not sure what page it is in our, but I think it's the second set of numbers, page 5. Under the gas tax, under revenues, there's a negative $35,418, and I'm trying to understand that. That's, I think, distributed monthly, and I'm not sure why there's a negative number there. I just wonder if you could help me understand that better.
Well, I generally tell you that the gas tax, gas usage during the pandemic went down. So because people weren't traveling for a good portion of the year, so therefore the amount of gas taxes went down.
This is negative because it's less than expected?
That's my understanding of the number, Craig.
Hold on a second. Identify yourself.
Sorry, Craig Steinhoff.
And tell everybody at home what you're doing here, who you're representing, why you're here, and so forth.
I am representing the town of Fort Myers Beach as their outsourced interim finance director. So just to give everybody a little bit of background, I've been working with Roger and the directors, like I said, as an outsourced contractor for a little bit. So to truly answer your question, I don't have a direct answer for that. I'm still getting my feet wet. I believe there might be some misclassifications between what's in the general fund and what's in that gas tax fund. And so I will be happy to take that question and get back to you with a better conclusion on that. It is something that I've made a point as far as working more timely with the directors on their budget to actuals, having a good solid close of the financials by the 15th of the following month. And so it's something that the department, the financial department, and I are working towards. So I would consider these unaudited numbers, but really noted of your question, and if you're okay with that, I'll get back to you with the response.
And that's fine, but there is gas revenue coming in every month.
Yes, there is.
So potentially this number might be aggregate 6-month number of the 35,000, negative 35,000 would be less than what we would normally, or what we had budgeted or predicted, or is that what you're saying? Potentially?
Yeah, potentially could be that, Counselor. I think Craig's right on when he says, let's get an exact answer and send that out in writing to all of you, so you, finite.
Right next to that column, under stormwater, there's a number that's $306,179. Again, I'm no budget expert, but it seems like we just had a significant rate increase. Seems like that number ought to, based upon last year's number, that number ought to be at least twice that number. Is there a mistake? Am I missing something on that?
Yeah, similar to your last question. It's one thing that I've noticed is the finance department, spending more time on the accuracy of the classification. So you see below that the miscellaneous, 339,000. I'll dig into this further and similar to the last question, reply back to you. But it very well could be that a portion of that that's recorded as miscellaneous might be those charges for services that you're referring to.
Okay, thank you. I do have a couple thoughts on initiatives, but those are the questions I had. One last question on the broader budget picture for the town. As you know, the assessed valuation down here continues to grow. Are we going to see a nice increase in revenue as a result of that? Have you guys done any calculations on that?
Preliminarily, that's the expectation, but it's sitting down with the directors based off of those projections and seeing do they have further projects to utilize those.
I mean, have you seen the numbers? Like last year, I think we had enhanced our revenue by a couple $100,000, and is it going to be similar to last year? Or do you have just a guess?
I would say that, don't forget that the growth numbers are based on what the growth was in December.
Okay.
So, we expect it'll be somewhere in the 2 to 3% range as it was last year.
When do you know that? When do you get the final numbers?
Get a preliminary roll in very beginning of July.
I have a question, Craig. I'm the council liaison to the audit committee, and that austere group of gentlemen are waiting for the report for last year, and they want to know when they're going to get it, because I think a few of them are going to leave town, and as dedicated as they are, they won't leave until they have a look at it.
Appreciate that. And that is something that was kind of task number one for me when I got here, was to work with Bob Lang on replying to some of the auditor's questions and comments, and most recently as yesterday, we were even replying to finalize that. So my expectation is we will have a final draft. I've already reviewed the draft, okayed the draft, and now it's just getting any of our responses to any of their comments in an updated draft, and then getting that ready for a meeting. So I would expect a meeting by the end of this month to be scheduled, and put that to bed, and then immediately after that, like Roger said, jump on the fiscal 22 budget.
Okay, by the end of the month, I'm going to hold you to that.
Hold me to that.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Mayor, just to be clear, there were last draft we received, there were 3 comments that the auditors made. We didn't necessarily fully agree with what they said. So we, I believe, today or yesterday, or about to give them yesterday? Yeah. Sent them responses on 2 of the 3 comments, things that we feel that they didn't consider in making their comment. So they will review those answers. They will then make a decision whether or not to update their draft audit. And then once that happens, then we're ready for the meeting.
All right. Sounds good. Any other questions?
You want to,
I don't have a question, but I have an initiative thing to bring up, so if Bill has a question.
I was going to.
Okay. 2 years ago, we had started a program to encourage people to plant shade trees.
Yes.
It's not a very large amount of money that we put into that. I didn't ask for it last year due to COVID.
Funded at $10,000 that first year, or are you thinking about a similar allocation, Vice Mayor?
Something similar. I'm not married to an exact number, and I think that we need to look at maybe revamping it somehow based on the data we got from the first year. We didn't have as much participation as I had hoped, so we either need better publicity or more days or more availability. I don't know why it didn't take off as I expected it would, but we need to discuss that and maybe revamp it a little bit.
Okay with that? Another shot?
That's fine.
It also kind of ties into the Marine Resources Task Force has been surveying the island looking for invasive plants. And so it's also an opportunity when we reach out to people and say, you've got a and such tree, Brazilian pepper, that to offer a replacement tree.
Anything else? Paul, did you have something else?
Yeah, well, we agreed to put on the a future MMP, the workforce housing initiative. And I did some work with some staff and some other research about just some of the nuts and bolts of how that could potentially work. I distributed a piece of paper with the intent that maybe we'll put it on a future MMP, but it would potentially affect the budget. So if we could maybe put that on maybe the next MMP, after people have a chance to think about it and discuss it.
And I was under the impression that the company that's reviewing the LDC was going to bring us some suggestions. Are they involved in this?
No.
Maybe we could get some input from them and put both sets of ideas on the future MMP. I'm in favor of it.
This is just kind of a thought process by me.
Anything else?
I would like to raise with my colleagues the idea of having further discussion and maybe put a placeholder in the budget, assuming the outcome of our discussion is positive, and obviously continuing to work with the Public Safety Committee. I'd like to consider a pilot program utilizing the proposed Lee County Sheriff's Community Policing Program for Fort Myers Beach. I talked to our new captain yesterday at length about it. About a year ago, I'd had breakfast with not this captain, but two other captains and a lieutenant for an hour and a half, and they I think their combined experience on our island, or at least with the Sheriff's Department, was 100 years, and they've all had served on Fort Myers Beach, strongly supported the community policing concept. The new captain, who's got a lot of experience on our island, supports the community policing option. So I did ask him, I said, what's the current cost estimate per officer? And they, of course, recommended 2 officers. That's always been the foundation of their proposal. And it's $112,644.71 per deputy. They did require 2 for scheduling reasons. I think I would just ask if that could be put on our next M&P calendar. And also, it's a significant expenditure, but I think the potential rewards for the island are significant, and given all the things that we have heard over the last few years with respect to the island. Again, just from a thumbnail sketch of this, the current officers, there are 2 officers assigned to our island, primarily, given their schedule and need for availability, respond to 911 calls. They're always responding. The community policing officers would be assigned permanently to our island, and they would get to know local businesses. They'd get to know the community. They could troubleshoot. They could, particularly with the homeless challenge, they could connect some of the homeless individuals with county services and try to get them help and hopefully transition away from homelessness. I just think there's a potential opportunity there. We could do it for a year as a pilot program. Again, work with our Public Safety Committee to put metrics in place to measure its success. I would just encourage at least a discussion at our next M&P meeting, and also to maybe put a placeholder in the budget for this cycle.
I yet to be convinced that it's a good idea, but I'm not against discussing it. And if we do put it on a future MMP, I would like to hear from Mr. Herron how that changes our liability. Can be a huge issue with policing. We don't have a police force, therefore we are not named in lawsuits when they're sued. But if we start paying for them, I believe that will cause a tendency for people to name us then in lawsuits. I'd like to know if that's true and how liable we might be under that scenario. I'm not asking for an answer now, just asking that you have an answer to that question when we discuss it in the future.
Nothing else.
I think in addition, I'd like to kind of hear the results of the Public Safety Committee survey and have just a discussion about safety in general, with this being one part of the.
Yeah, they're currently working on and trying to come up with the metrics and recommendations for the council as to the benefits or lack of benefits to having, community policing, and if so, where to focus their attention. Obviously, homeless is a big thing, and in my conversations also with the Lee County Sheriff's Office, it's been that their recommendation is the community policing will help a lot in that, because instead of just the greatest term, but shooing them along and asking them to move along, because they're not technically breaking the law in certain cases, that they can, facilitate them getting to the places where they could get services that they need that we may not provide. It's things like that that the Public Safety Committee is looking at to bring us recommendations fairly soon. The survey obviously being one. I share the same sentiments that Councilman Adderholt brought up. I was going to bring up the exact same thing, so that's one less thing I need to talk about.
Councilor Adderholt, could you just restate the number you read? I'm not sure I got it exactly right.
It's okay. I got it from the captain yesterday morning, the new captain, Layler, is that how it's pronounced? Layler. $112,644.71 per deputy.
Thank you.
So it's double that number.
That's right.
Got it.
It's a very specific number.
It is a
Down
very
to the
specific
penny.
number. I don't know how they do that, but
They've pinned it down through their program that they've had with Bonita for several years. I mean, they've got it to the penny pretty much.
Round up to the nearest. Anybody else?
I do have one other thing that kind of goes into the public safety part of it. And, speaking of years of discussions, the lighting project that has been discussed ad nauseum for 4 or 5 years, I think we need to seriously take it. Obviously we're looking at it now, but I think we need to maybe consider, much like previous council did when it was talked about with Bay Oaks, they took an initiative to put a line item in to start putting away some money for something that we eventually decided we're going to move forward with. Put it on a future MMP if we need to discuss it, about potentially putting some sort of line item in, whether it be for lighting maintenance, should we choose one of whatever options they give us, to provide a line item to help alleviate having a lot of discussions year after year over maintaining it, depending on which route we go to add the lighting to Estero Boulevard. Well, my conversations with the county, they've been very clear about they're not even willing to discuss their role paying for stuff until we make a decision on what we feel is best for the island. The sooner we can make that decision, the sooner they will enter into discussions with us as far as who's paying for what, how it's getting paid for. So just keep that in the back of the mind as we move forward.
I think that's a great question, because as I understand it, Roger, from Florida Power and Light, now that they have 3 turtle-friendly options that are included in their tariff, theoretically, Roger, help me with this, there is no cost to the town. Is that correct? They can pass those costs on to their broader rate base through their tariff, but there would be no charge for the town. Have you had any further discussions with FP&L as to how that tariff will work if we select one of these 3 options that they've presented?
Well, again, it depends if, you select that and clearly we're investing money to determine whether the community and ultimately our committees and the council, whatever the best solution is in the long term. But clearly that would be the most cost-effective one in terms of what the potential outlay to the town would be. But I know that everyone is, at least that I've talked to, is very interested in getting the best system versus the cheapest system, so we'll have to see where that process takes us. But just going back to what Council Allard said is that as we get to this process and if we reach a conclusion about the system, and if it's the FP&L system, that's pretty easy. We can, they're pretty good at generating a number of what the cost would be and what cost would be covered by the tariff, et cetera. What would be direct costs that would have to be borne by us or Lee County. If we don't go with FPL and go in a different direction, the next step would be to actually put together a design package for bidding to determine a specific price so that then we could, go to our partners and see if we can put together the money with them to implement that solution, if that's the solution that's selected. I would say that if we're talking about budgeting money for next year, it would probably be for the design.
I can kind of concur. I think that it's kind of like the elephant in the room as far as the ramifications for the budget, but we really don't know at all what the number will be. Get a design down until we get FP&L about what works.
Yeah, I think what Roger was just saying, if I'm not mistaken, Roger, is you concur or not concur that it would be a good idea to have a line item for whether it be design, if it could shift from year to year, maybe the first year it's for design, maybe the next year it's maintenance. Or does it have to be specifically laid out exactly what it would be intended for, or what it's used for? Can it just simply street lighting be general?
Well, it could be whatever the council would like it to be in terms of, how specific it is or how flexible it is. I think that it should be any surprise for any of you to hear that I think that we need to position ourselves to sort of present this project on a silver platter to the county and say, here it is, gang. And in my mind, that is to get a firm price for a solution that meets all of your expectation, our two committees who are involved in this expectation, our community's expectation, and say, here's what we want. And sit down with the county and say, it's your road. We're willing to participate, but at the end of the day, it's your road, and here's the project we want, and let's get it done and see what they say. So I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I think, the flexibility part of it is, we could be as flexible as not. Frankly, if we said it was for X on October 1st, on November 1st, you could come in as a council and say, well, we've changed our mind. It's now for Y, so that's not really a big thing. I think magnitude of the amount is really what the issue is. So I really see the next logical step based on the path that we're currently on. Again, if FP&L option falls off the table for some reason, would be for us to design a system and get a bid on that and be able to go to the county with hard numbers and say, okay, the price is $112,644.71. How much of this are you willing to help us with?
I thought the current consultants we were talking, they were going to present a design. Or are they just presenting their suggestions?
They're presenting, they're going to present a recommended design, but you still have to get a bid price, right? You have to just you have to then go out to get bids to say, okay, what's that price? Well, we would have to then take that design, put it out for bids, and get a price. And that part of the process of meeting with the bidders and answering their questions and evaluating the bids, that's the next phase.
And I guess that's where I come in. I would want to be proactive to whatever we may think that design number may be to add into it. I would hate to have them come in with a suggestion of a design and then we have to wait another fiscal year to get money in the budget to be able to get that design done. I just kind of want to stay ahead of it.
I think that's a fair point. I think what you're advocating for is sort of set aside a placeholder for X amount, yeah.
Well, I think we need to be careful because if we, worst case scenario, we would have to definitely phase the project because we couldn't afford to do it all, unless we had significant participation by Lee County. So we'll have those types of discussions as well. This is not a $2 or $3 million project potentially.
And even if it weren't put, even if it weren't put in the budget, there would still be adequate funds available to start the process if need be, out of reserves or wherever else we could pull it from.
Well, so the answer to your question, Mr. Mayor, is yes, but the problem is when you pull money out of reserves, then next year you have the double hit of punishing the reserve and paying for whatever you're doing going forward. So,
I'm just trying to alleviate.
yeah, I mean, I think there's flexibility, but I think the real elephant in the room is that potentially a fully customized system with new poles that are not FPL poles and all that, up and down this island, is going to be very, very expensive.
Could you comment, again, we love our friends at Lee County and love our relationship with them, but could you comment, or maybe John comment, just on procedurally what the county's obligation is? I know this is somewhat gray, but with respect to incurring the cost of the lighting solution on Estero Boulevard, it's their road. They've been very gracious in wanting to partner with us on a lot of things. What is their legal obligation with respect to incurring those costs, or a portion of those costs? How does it, I know it's, again, nebulous behind the scenes, but what's the stated responsibility of the county with respect to that project and incurring those costs?
I'll take a stab at it first, John. As I understand the way the county has sort of approached the municipalities is they've said that we provide a basic level of services of X, and whether you're talking about landscaping or roads or whatever, that's what they provide. And they've taken the position, if you want anything above X, you have to petition us to sort of do it as an initiative or pay for it yourself. And their general position has been, at least to date, as I understand it, is that they don't routinely put safety lighting on their roads. So
You use that term safety lighting. Do you mean?
safety lighting well, it's safety lighting, but then it's turtle lighting because you can't have full-blown safety lighting due to our location.
You use the term safety lighting. Is that lighting period or
Lighting.
Street lighting?
Right.
Okay. In the roads that they oversee outside of Fort Myers Beach, they don't put street lights, or they just do because they choose to? They don't have an obligation to do that?
Well, it's, I would say that they use this tiered approach to things. And as I understand the tier that we're in, that typically they wouldn't do it, or else there would be full-blown lighting up and down the street now, which is not the case. So I'd hope that they would understand the importance of Estero Boulevard, not necessarily lump it in with all its, collector roads per se, but understand that it has a special value. Understand it may need a special treatment, so that special value. We have some work to do. If we find ourselves in a position of we're going to have sort of a one-off customized system. Respect to that, because, it would be a significant project if we took it on ourselves.
I appreciate going back to the budget with this, is that I appreciate the kind of fiscally conservative model that Councilman Allers is saying, make sure we have money there for if we need it. The only one of the tipping points of that would be is what if that number in our budget means that we're going to have to increase our tax rate? It could be a tipping point that could have some ramifications for money that we may not need. Or
well, just to be clear, if we're talking about beginning to assemble the money to fund the project 100% on our own, I can tell you that it will increase our tax rate. If that's the direction it ultimately goes in. It's going to be too big a number that we can't.
I think it's important to at least gather that information that we can present to the public and let them decide whether or not they're okay with, if for some reason you go with the most expensive option, it's going to cost this much. You're going to make a decision when you know ahead of time what it's going to cost you, as opposed to we want to do this and we're going to raise the taxes for it, not have any input at all. So I guess what I'm advocating for is to get at least a line item in the budget, whatever that amount Roger feels or the staff feels is appropriate for the design phase of it. At least we're staying ahead of it. And we're going to be presented with some options. We all know we need it. The county, I'm quite certain, knows it's needed. The public obviously knows it's needed, and I think that there's a lot of will from the public to make sure that that safety item is finally addressed. And I think that's where we come in. So the more we can be proactive, the more we can stay ahead of this, I think the better and the faster things will get done. We can make the decision once we get presented with it from the consulting firm. This is what we recommend. We had one already. We can combine the two of them together if we need to, come up with the best solution. Then we can go to the county and have all these conversations that we're having now. This is what, as a community, we feel is best, not only for us, but for Lee County. This is what it's going to cost and move forward.
And counsel, I don't disagree with you that, that I think that many people in the community, would support additional town resources going to getting that done. And I think, just like Councilor Adholt was speaking about earlier, it's a good story and we have to tell it because no one else will. But a story to be told what the benefits would be, why it would be good, and we'll need to do that. And I also agree with you that we have to have sort of a tangible product with a price to help educate them and help them understand what they would be getting, what the cost would be, hopefully with the county participating and so on and so forth, so that everybody can get behind the project. But not just conceptually, but, put their shoulder to the boulder.
I understand what you're trying to say, Dan. I think you're getting the cart before the horse a little bit. I think we need to get those numbers back from the consultant first, get a handle on it, and get those proposals back from the consultant, and then get those out to bid so we can have some figures in hand, and then decide in negotiation who's paying for what, and then when it boils down to that, we can decide as a body here which way we're going to go, and then of course we'll have to put it into our budget. I think that's what the procedure is going to be. Anyhow, all right. I think we've pretty much hammered the budget discussion. This, as the manager said, this was just the kickoff today. There'll be lots of other opportunities for the council and the public to weigh in on the budget as we get further into the summer here. The next item we'll go on is the discussion regarding upland services options. Discussion regarding upland services options. Who wants to start this out?
So, I want to thank the council. Some of you have come to us and made suggestions about potential locations, and we're beginning to look at those. The council has authorized me to spend some money to do some due diligence on the viability of the sites, and we have a coastal engineering firm who will be helping us do that. Clearly, if there are any sites that are front runners, we would like to focus our energy on those first. If there are any sites that have too many merits that, difficult to not meet all the needs, of course, we'd like to know if any of those. And then last but not least, it was late yesterday, I think we received a further email from Matanzas, which I believe has been shared with you. But, we're looking everywhere, and the main reason this is sort of back on the agenda was our last conversation. I was asked to contact the folks at Moss Marine and feel them out on whether or not they would be interested in partnering up in the town in some fashion. And based on the state of the program and where they are with their future development, the timing is not really right for them, the way I would interpret what they've told me. A couple of years as Mooringfield perhaps grows and gets stabilized, it might be more interesting for them, but business perspective for them. But right now, the size and the amount of work it would take to get it to that level just doesn't interest them right now. So with that being said, locations that we're currently looking at is, there's a county piece of property on St. Carlos Island. There's canals in this vicinity, either through perhaps a deal with the fire department or somewhere adjacent to town hall. Is one of the things we're looking at. We're at this point, we are not looking at Bay Oaks per se. Town has another right-of-way that one of the councils suggested, and I don't want to go over them if they want to bring that up or not, but they asked us to look at the underlying public uses of that property to see if it could be considered or not. And of course, our fallback position, and we know the Anchorage Committee is not in favor of this, would be that if all else fails, perhaps to do a 5-year plan with trailers ourselves. So we continue to explore all properties, and now that we have the consultant on board, we're looking at them and a little more technical review and get you some better information on the viability. But if there are locations that you want to prioritize, please let me know. If there are locations that you're a problem ridden from the jump start, please let me know. And we're open to looking at any and all locations. So if there's any new locations that haven't been mentioned yet, please put them out there for us to look at.
Roger, could you, of the options that you mentioned, could you give us a synopsis as, for instance, the trailers under the bridge? That sounds like, based on what you said, is probably the most site-ready to go tomorrow, if you will. Mm-hmm. How is it that the town would look at either the land across on San Carlos Island that you were talking about the county owns versus the Virginia Avenue property the town owns?
So the property that on St. Carlos Island that the county owns, we're looking at there is how to minimize our footprint so that if we approach them about using a portion of their land, we would use as little as possible. That's what we're looking at there. And then to see if they would engage us either property transfer or lease, or long-term lease or whatever. We would also ask them if they wanted us to put some additional facilities on that property for them if they have a use over there that they would like to have. So that's what we're working on over there. Virginia is a public right-of-way, but we have to look at the underlying use there. The public use is limited, and I don't know if John's had a chance to do that or not yet, but sometimes it just says public use, and sometimes it says X, Y, and Z only. So he needs to look at that one to see if there are some limitations. So, I guess what I would really answer you, Counselor, is every property has a problem. It's just really, or a drawback, if you will. It's just really which one has the smallest one and that can be overcome. News, bad news, good news is that the land values here in this area are very good. Bad news is when you need land, it's problematic.
If I could tag on to what Roger indicated, having been with the AAC for some time now, and Kathy can correct me if I'm wrong, but Virginia has been talked about. 2 years ago, we were talking about Virginia, and every time it's brought up, we get a lot of residents, as we often do here, who do not want a business-like atmosphere occurring on the canal for their street. And that would also be in the street on the other side of the canal of Virginia as well. So that's something to prepare yourself for. If you keep bringing up Virginia, you are going to start hearing from those people again. We heard from them in the past.
And to the Vice Mayor's point, if we did something in any of the canals, this vicinity, in the heart of the island, if you will, and where, we would be at the terminus of the canal, towards the end of the canal, so everybody coming to see us would be going up and down the length of that canal. We're going to get similar types of comments.
I heard suggestions to use the property right here behind Chapel or behind Town Hall, and you would have all of the boats, then all of the dinghies coming in all the way past every neighbor on that canal, because the property is at this end of the canal, not toward the other end of the.
I think that's probably the big downside of the town hall property, but the advantages are pretty significant. And one of those is that if you could build on to town hall, you have to be like an extension of the upstairs. We would create a secure storage area, wouldn't really take up any parking. Wouldn't have to acquire any additional land, except for maybe the lot that has the end of the canal. The fire department is also willing to work with us with the end of that canal. They don't have any really short-term plans for doing it. And something at town hall, then it allows you not only to use existing staff to manage everything, then you could tie in things like Bay Oaks as far as the amenities that are offered by the Upland Services would include all the amenities of Bay Oaks, pool, and this goes on, which would probably move you up in a class of service, certainly more than a bunch of trailers would. There are some pitfalls for it. And
When I mention the resident objections, I'm not saying I'm taking that position, but this council in the past backed down when residents objected to a sidewalk going down Connecticut Street, which is much less of a disruption than a mooring field office is. So
I don't know.
I just, I find
don't know
it
if I necessarily agree with that, because we're not going to be launching a canal on people's, right on people. The canal already exists. It'll be more traffic on an existing street. I understand what you're saying, but I don't necessarily agree with that comparison.
John had his hands up. I'd like to hear what he has to say.
I would remind the council that at the council's specific direction, drafted and the council recently approved Resolution 21-12 with regard to bathrooms, public bathrooms and public rights-of-way. It says that you don't allow them anymore unless they're for replacement of previously existing public bathrooms. Extent that the upland use would have public bathrooms, that facility would violate this resolution, I would contend. There's a lot of discussion led by a couple of that you didn't want that type of intrusion into the residential neighborhoods.
This would be, Virginia would be, I assume,
Right away.
included in that, and the under the bridge, or the trailers under the bridge? That's actually county that we.
That's not a residential
That's
neighborhood.
different, that's a public, a parking lot that already exists. And if I
State
remember,
right-of-way
that's FDOT, we would get FDOT permission to do so.
Sounds like we already got that.
Out of the options we discussed, then it's really Virginia that's affected.
I guess what we're getting down to here now is San Carlos Island, under the bridge, or continuing on with that's pretty much what.
And just to reiterate, you did receive sort of a updated proposal from one of the property owners, was distributed to you today, so.
Would not dismiss town hall, because I think it has a lot of benefits.
Speaking to the proposal that we received, I found this really, I find it difficult to understand, and they indicate that they would include a bathroom to be used by the public. When the condo association itself objected to that use, how could Estero Bay Hotel Company assure us of that? It seems to conflict with what we've been told.
I would echo that sentiment that the last time this particular property was looked at, I was informed that there wouldn't be parking. We had to adhere to the HOA regulations, the condo association regulations, of which this piece of property is still part of, and that the condo association reserved the unilateral right to modify the regulations going forward. Not that they reserve the right, they have that right. And we would be one of many voting members, even, and under this scenario, we would not be a voting member of that condo association because they're providing for a lease. They could terminate. So if we're,
It would be adding another layer essentially to.
yeah,
Yes.
and if you know, the idea, as I understand it, that the direction the council gave to staff is that if we were going to make this investment of money, of time and money to have this upland facility, it would be for long-term use and subject to a lease may, unless it's we negotiate a long-term lease. But I see that.
For me, the numbers don't seem to add up. You're talking $5,200 a month in rent, based on roughly just looking this over. The town to be a tenant and not have a vote, as opposed to using the property value of buying it at 325, then you eliminate that extra layer of uncertainty, if you will.
Value on the vote.
Well,
One vote in a condo association doesn't mean a hell of a lot.
being the liaison for the Anchorage Advisory Committee, have there been, and if there has been, any discussions on a potential use of property on San Carlos Island? Has that been,
We haven't discussed that yet.
That's a, Council, that's a very recent development, we're still looking at it, whether or not that, I mean, we're gonna bring it to them, but we're gonna bring it to them if we know when it's viable or not. We still don't know that.
I just wasn't sure if maybe there was a suggestion.
I think there is an underlying concern that I've heard just with that, and that is that I think there's a preference for it to be on the town of Fort Myers Beach side, if that's possible, but, because obviously the people of the mooring field would, be more inclined to support our businesses and things if it were on our side than if it were on the other side, but, given the fact that we have limited options, we have to look at everything.
And, the trailer issue for me underneath we've had several discussions, and previous councils have had several discussions about the term trailers and, bathrooms and trailers on the island, and it's met with a lot of resistance. And I understand the facade, and trust me, I get construction. I completely understand how you could make something look much different than what it was intended to look like. But I don't know that everybody shares that same vision. But I understand their hesitancy about wanting to be in trailers, if you will, underneath the bridge. But we're kind of getting to a point where we have to make a decision. Something has to happen.
Right. So we have, we're running out of time. So we have to just, come to a conclusion that we don't have a better answer and see if we can continue our current level of services the way they are and see if the provider is willing to do that. If we're going to give serious consideration to the trailers, we need to do that soon because there's a lead time in getting them and having them. They're not sitting in a field somewhere. They have to be manufactured. So we have to make that decision soon if we're going to go in that direction. If we're not, obviously we don't. Then continue to look at the ups and downs or positives and negatives of these other locations. Talking about.
What direction do you need from us, I guess? Do you want us to specifically give you 2-3 options to zone in on?
It'd be great if everyone said that this is our number one. I don't think I'm going to hear that today, although I would love to.
I think you need a little more investigation into that, just away from us.
Yeah, I mean, from my observation is that you separate the fact that it's not within the town of Fort Myers Beach. We don't own it, but if we could find a way to get use of that land, that does put a lot of check boxes in a lot of other categories, other than it's not in town of Fort Myers beach limits.
I guess my preference would be to focus in on, obviously, based on what John has said, Virginia doesn't seem like it's a viable possibility, which leaves us with the Harbor House, which we've discussed, trailers underneath the bridge, or potentially the site across on San Carlos. I don't know that the canal issue coming down to right over here, I see your point, and I completely understand it, but I also see your point with the hesitancy we're going to get from people coming down the canal every time they want to come to a facility. So
Can I just, sorry to interrupt, just make one quick comment on that canal issue where the new fire station would go. There's a unique dynamic going on there that might help us address some of the vice mayor's legitimate concern there from residents. Is that there is a third party that's, to be diplomatic here, threatening the homeowners along that canal for reasons that I think are a bit nefarious. And I think if the town partners with the fire department to help those residents legally and address that challenge, that might please them greatly, A, and B, maybe help soften the opposition to potential opportunity at that particular facility. I don't know, John knows the issue well, he could comment further, but I just think.
Is that code? How do you get into that?
I'm not a lawyer, but John knows the particulars, yeah.
I think that at one point or another, I've spoken to most of you, if not all, regarding the fact that there is an individual that claims ownership of the canal bottom and is asserting to all the owners, including the fire district, that in order to be able to either place a new dock or continue to maintain their existing dock, that they need, that those individual property owners need to pay that individual or that entity, it's a corporation, a fee or a cost. And there's differing values. I think that depending on if it's residential versus commercial, size of the property, et cetera, it's a sliding scale. We have informed property owners who have issues or concerns about that the town, that's a private dispute. The town really doesn't have standing to take a side. And the extent that the fire district has acquired the property, the fire district attorney reached out to me several months ago asking about that issue. I told him what I knew, forwarded them the information. He said, well, the fire district would cross that bridge when they got to it, but they didn't need to address it at this point in time. Whether or not that changes, particularly in the context of the town partnering with the district, that may change. But still, as it currently stands, the town being on the sidelines because it doesn't have standing legally to take a position or argue that the Bay Bottom owner is correct in its position, or the adjacent property owners up and down the canal as to whether or not they've acquired rights of use and access. All the property owners were granted an easement to use the waters of the canal for access to their property. Whether or not that means they also have the right to maintain a dock associated with that use would ultimately be something for them to resolve with the Bay Bottom owner or take the matter to court.
And I think, sorry, I was just going to say, but Councilor Hall, your point is that if we dove into that situation and figure out a global solution, we perhaps could create some goodwill with people.
I thought.
I just want to put a helmet on before I dive into that, though.
You need a helmet. You need a helmet.
I can tell you in conversations with a property owner on Tropical Shores Way that just went through the legal process of fighting this, they spent in excess of $20,000 just to gain the access to keep their dock. So keep that in mind and add up all the houses that are there and what potentially you know, and maybe the town being involved, it could mitigate some of that, but they
They
were
do this,
obviously
just a clarification, did they do this by like winning in court or by,
spent over $20,000 in legal fees to win in court, is my understanding, for,
I didn't mean to
to have
interrupt,
their,
just
to
wanna get
have their dock there and him to not say, you can't use my dock because it's on my property.
And I would suggest then that to the extent there is such a court ruling, that every other property owner up and down the canal, including the fire district, could use that as a template to assert that they have the legal right to use the bay bottom without having to pay anything to the property owner. But I've not seen a copy of the court order, so I can't say anything more than what I've already said. I'll leave it at that.
And as we know from TPI, it could be appealed and appealed and appealed.
I think that now, my conversation with you, John, is that having the bottom means that if you want to drive a piling into the bottom, their assertion is that then you need their rights, but if you want a cantilever or something, you don't.
I think that that's certainly an argument that can be made. I'm sure that the property owner of the bay bottom would disagree.
Mr. Mayor, if we're wrapping up the conversation about the plant facilities, you know, you might be questioning why the folks from the Refresher Sterile project are staying. I'm sure they're intrigued by all this. So, but the real reason I think they're staying is, I think, all may have been, you didn't ask those questions earlier, but they may pop up in your mind towards the end of the meeting, and I didn't want to leave without being here to answer them. But there's two issues that they've come across your email inbox. One's dealing with some drains on Palermo that are not fully. Yeah, there's two. There's one is we're looking at the wall construction there and evaluating it to see if it needs to be adjusted because we've got a complaint that isn't working effectively. And the second thing is there's a paving at the end of Palermo. Primo. And the problem we're having there is that it's a very, very narrow street. People, particularly trucks, are going to the end of the cul-de-sac, the end of the street, the end of the cul-de-sac, making a multiple point turn. That's tearing up this new asphalt. Because it can't take the stress of being new and hot. It can't take the stress of the tires turning on it. So we're going to have to develop a solution which may result in some road reconstruction or using concrete there or blocking that off for a period of time for it to cure, or we're still evaluating that, Tim, from an engineering standpoint. But I'm going to share with you, we are aware of it and we are working on it, and we will develop an engineering solution for it. So if you have any questions, these folks are here to answer those. Yeah, if not, I'm sure we'll go on and do other things.
I have no further questions at this time. Can go.
Adios. Okay, I have no idea how that got in with the upland services, but anyhow, we're going to move on to the next item, which is HOA beach accesses. This is an update of maintaining HOA beach accesses.
So, Mr. Mayor, this was initiated by the Vice Mayor. She asked us to take a look at them to be sure the non-public ones are being maintained. And then if we can either get them maintained or even better perhaps have them be handed off to the town for them to become public. So we've looked at them all, and the next step that we're going to be doing is sending them each a general letter sort of outlining, you sort of remind them in a very gentle way their responsibility to maintain it and ask them for a contact person. So if there is a maintenance issue, we can get in touch with them before it escalates into a bigger problem such as code enforcement or whatever. And moreover, if they would consider turning it over to the town, unfortunately, as appropriately pointed out by the Vice Mayor when she raised this thing, issue. A lot of these were created a long time ago. The HOAs are somewhat, fragmented, some cases, not operating, and so there's some work to be done, but we wanted to let you know that we haven't forgot about it. We are working on it. And we understand the importances of trying to increase the number of beach accesses, particularly in the south end of the island.
I have some significant changes to make to this chart. First of all, everybody has a copy of what looks like a very old legal document. I had provided this to Chelsea, and I don't know why it wasn't included in the packet, but it shows the grant of the land, the one that says Cross Street, Egret, Ibis. It concerns that. And it says Sea-Watch Gulfview Manor is the owner. It is not. The owner is Sandpiper Village, according to this deed. Now, unless John found out something different that I don't know about it, and I did provide this to John as well, it shows that it was granted to Sandpiper Village. I think it's 1 and 2, they call it. So that line should say Sandpiper Village as the owner. Vegetation maintained. It is being maintained, but the question is it being maintained by the HOA? Which the answer is no. I have talked to the condo owners on both sides of the property. They say they mow it because the HOA is not taking care of it. And I believe that is the case on some of the others where we believe it's being taken care of. In fact, what's happening is that the property owners next door are taking care of it. The condo owners there are not necessarily friendly about the fact that they are taking care of it. They weren't very happy about that when I spoke to them. I went in and talked to them about it because I regularly find encroachment onto that beach access. In fact, there are sprinkler heads nearly in the middle of the beach access that's been put on by one of the property owners, and I don't know which one. They have encroached on it to the point that they're putting sprinkler heads into it. I have been unable to find that the HOA is in any way active anymore, but I have been told by the neighborhood people there that it was at one time active. I didn't provide you copies, but I have pictures of signs which used to be at that access, calling it the Sandpiper Village access. I have photographs of those in the past. But I'm quite concerned about that one because of the fact that the condos are encroaching on it. Yet they direct people not to walk through their property because it's private property and send people over to that access. So because of that's one of the ones that the HOA is not taking care of, I worry that the condos eventually down the road when all the memories of all the old people everybody's died who remembers that's there. I fear that the condos are going to take that and it will become private property. And because I know that much about this one, I believe that that may be similar circumstances to some of the others. If it's happening to one, I believe it's likely that it's happening with the others.
Madam Vice Mayor, in your conversation with these people, are they aware of the potential benefit of the town taking it over when it comes to beach renourishment?
I did not bring that up with anybody. I have not brought up to anybody the town taking it over yet because I wanted to make sure that it was possible. There was some mechanism that I don't know if we got 90% of the homeowners in the HOA to agree if that would be enough. Is there any kind of precedent for how many people would have to agree? So I didn't even want to bring any of that up yet because I don't even know that it's legally possible to accomplish.
In the previous conversations that the council has had, really we were going to try and target ones specifically mentioned by the vice mayor that they look to exist, but who owns it is in question, and those were the ones that we potentially were going to target. What is in your materials, it goes beyond that and is identified in many instances specific access points and who owns them and that they're in some instances marked as private access easements. The question is, do you want to direct staff to approach those associations and those ownership groups to see if they would be willing to turn them over or make them available as public access points? My educated guess is probably not,
Well, and I
because
guess
it's an
that-
amenity.
I guess that's my question is if it would make sense to provide the benefits of what it means of the town having the public, having them as public accesses versus, towards the beach renourishment. Providing that information to the head of the association for their meetings and maybe let them do the legwork of trying to gather the information that we would need to even have a discussion with them.
I would defer to staff, but I do believe that when it comes to grant funding and being the project ranked, the more we can show that there's broad beach access, the higher the project will score at the state level, which will make our project rise in the list of for available funds.
I think there are two other things I would add. Besides the beach renourishment, there's also TDC funding available for maintenance of these, putting up the signs, et cetera. Number two, as far as I know with the Sandpiper Village access, the entire public is using that access now. The people across the street at the Dolphin Inn regularly use that access, and I don't believe it's deeded to them because I don't think they're part of Sandpiper Village. So the people in that HOA would lose nothing. They would still have access because they're part of the public. It wouldn't be keeping anybody out that wasn't already using it, but the benefit would be that it would remain open to them. My fear is that eventually this will become private property somehow, and then the people who live in Sandpiper Village will no longer have access to it. So that's an important aspect that we need to convey to them as well.
Both of those points, Council Alves, Vice Mayor, are the points that we would put into this letter that we're going to try to send to, I'm going to say blanket the potential people, successors of the Homeowners Association, to say, hey, we're willing to do this. Here are the benefits. Here's, I agree with the Vice Mayor. I don't know that if any of these became public, there would be a slew of people who are not using it today would come and use it.
Without any parking.
Without parking.
Right, and they don't have room for parking at these.
I have a question, because you're going on about, now, you said that you don't think this HOA is operational now.
No,
They haven't met, do people pay a dues?
no.
Well, how do you negotiate to own something that doesn't exist?
Well, that's what I'm saying. There may be some way that we could get a written consent from all the property owners who live, for example, in Sandpiper Village to say, I agree that I will transfer my ownership interest in this beach access to the town of Fort Myers Beach. I don't know if there's any precedent if it's 90% of those people or.
All the people who live there still have the rights to be part of this HOA, even if they're not
Right.
functioning.
Right. And occasionally what happens is somebody who lives there paints the sign and goes out and sticks it up. It's not there right now because when the road crew went through, they took it down. And it was lost in essence.
The Vice Mayor's making a very good point, and that is, typically you would say, okay, you get, 50 plus 1, you have approval, or, you have 60%, you have approval. In this case, it's unknown how many people would have to agree to get approval, and each one of them could be different. So, we're going to sort of, shotgun this letter out with hopes that, we can get some interaction with people on the street who, the mayor of the association, even though the unofficial mayor, see if they'll help us with the legwork to see if we can get some type of consent of the owners to be cleaned up and or transferred to the town.
The thing that I found fascinating too was that we found out that we actually already owned one of these beach accesses and apparently we're unaware of it.
Would that be the Anchorage one?
One that's in yellow here, Albatross.
Okay. Oh, right.
Deeded to town of Fort Myers Beach with public access. And we've never signed it. Put a sign up.
I think, if you go to the LIPA site too, the Anchorage one, it shows it as being a continuation of the right-of-way. So it doesn't show ownership by the town, but it has no strap numbers, no separate deeded space. They said they don't see any,
Would imply that it's in public ownership.
right.
Because that's how LIPA, the LIPA website generally reflects government-owned property, particular rights-of-way, so that just they don't designate anything, which is a problem in it itself sometimes, but.
That's the way the beach access is essentially
Correct.
to like streets.
I guess the other thing I would say is I'd like to put this out publicly as an appeal. We've got Voorhees and Anchorage that we don't know, we don't have information about. I'm betting that there are old people who live on that street who have pieces of paper like I got from my neighbor down the street on Egret. But when they bought the house a million years ago, they were provided some proof of their deeded beach access. And somebody may have paperwork that's not filed with LIPA that would be helpful to us to determining who actually owns these. So if you have a senior neighbor and you live in one of these neighborhoods that has a beach access, the town would love to have any of this paperwork that you can come up with.
Approach that we're taking in terms of trying to sort of broadcast a letter to try to open a dialogue with any and all people, such as the people the Vice Mayor was just alluding to, about the current state of their access, what their future plans are, and why it may be beneficial to them and definitely beneficial to us if they would consider turning it over to the town. Is comfortable with that approach?
And I'd love to see, maybe Jennifer could put something out in her
Yeah,
newsletter that,
once we get the letter out, we'll
Yeah.
also broadcast it through that mechanism as well.
Get it in
and
the paper, do whatever, anything we can to get it out, as opposed to mailing it to every homeowner. Maybe put the letter in the, I don't know if that's.
Yeah,
legally
you know,
can do it or not.
I think I'm gonna have to mail it, to be honest with you, but, you know, we could do bulk mail, so, I mean, we're gonna have to mail it to them. It doesn't have to be necessarily first class, because it doesn't have to be on a date certain, but we'll need to get it out.
I guess, I just meant not having to mail it to every specific condo owner within each building.
Yeah, you know, hopefully we can send it to the board or whatever,
can
for the
take
common areas, wherever the common area is listed.
and I guess the second thing I would ask is, it seems that we need some legal research on this issue. I don't know if we have to authorize John, he could even maybe put a law clerk on it to find out what legal hurdles we need to, if there is any case law on this
Okay.
about,
Well, like something like Sandpiper, I mean, was there ever an HOA, or is this just?
there was at one time a functioning HOA.
So that HOA had bylaws, right?
I haven't found them. And I can't find a living person who was an officer. So
Any dead ones?
there are some dead ones.
We'll look into it. I'll start doing some at least preliminary researches to basically answer the question, what happens when a mandatory homeowners association, fails to conduct business? What happens? Kind of like a corporation, my guess is it
Right.
gets administratively dissolved. And then what, if anything, with voluntary? Because there are some, as crazy as it may sound, there are some voluntary homeowner association or condo associations out there. Obviously, I take that back. If it's a condo association, it's governed by state law. You can't have a condo association or condo form of ownership unless there's paperwork filed with the state of Florida. So I think they fall into two different categories. But we'll look into that and have that information available and communicate with staff so we can target the appropriate entities or individuals if possible.
Good.
It would be interesting because, it's not like a right-of-way where if it vacates, it goes to adjacent owners. This would be actually an asset owned by an entity that no longer exists. So I'd be interested to know where that goes.
I mean, in all honesty, there is a way to find them, if we tried to eminent domain the land, I'm sure they would all show up, but we don't want to do that.
Well, but I think that one of their argument really to make to the people there is, okay, if you want to form an HOA that's now going to have to maintain this and you're going to have to pay a fee, an HOA, or instead of going through with that and not having a fee, you can just turn it over to the town, and then you're not paying the fee. That's a pretty valuable asset.
So I hope, I think this was a good discussion, Mr. Mayor, but I think also, if nothing else, let's learn a lesson that the more specific we are on conditions for future developments, the less of these types of issues we'll have in the future.
Okay.
I'm in favor of the man, giving him, he was looking for direction, Mr. Mayor, as far as if we're okay with the approach, send out the letter to the HO. I'm in favor of that approach.
Yeah, okay, good.
I have heard some people who are in condos that have an HOA or have an access that is restricted. They're not usually in favor of making it public because they think that's going to mean there's more people going to their beach and crowding out the beach in front of their condo. I don't know if that's really true because I don't think people who are fluffing chairs really obey the, private beach access.
Again, we're not really thinking about putting, an alternating, flashing red and yellow sign in any of these, light or something like that, be a very discreet sign, beach access number 23 or 28 or 29, whatever it is, and, sort of, whatever the condominium is, and, instead of just saying no public access, we just wouldn't say that. It would be discreet in terms of the facts. So I don't know that would generate a lot more traffic / people.
I guess the other thing I'd like to mention is, since we have learned that one of these is owned by the town, do you need direction from us to go ahead and put the beach access signs there and add it to our list when we ask for funding next year from the TDC, that we've got another one that we can add in for costs?
Yeah, well, we would just, basically, you're correct, Madam Vice Mayor, we would just add it to our inventory and begin to do all the things we do on the other ones to the extent that, the size of it is appropriate.
I would be in favor of doing that. I don't know if the rest of council believes that we should be contacting the neighbors on either side and letting them know in advance that that's our position. I believe it's 2 condos.
I mean, we
on
would
either
let
side.
them know just as a courtesy.
Okay. Everybody's in favor that we start acting like we own it?
We do, yeah. I would be in favor of letting the condos on either side know that this is the information that's out there, and this is our steps as to what we're going to do to take it over.
I would think Anchorage as well. I mean, I can't see without a strap number how that's owned by an entity.
There's, I guess at some point in time, in the olden days here, possession was 9/10 of the law here, so,
That might be one that we would need to file something to clear title on, maybe? Make sure?
The one where we already have it?
No, the one in
that-
Anchorage where there's no strap number.
I mean, we could get a
We'll
survey.
look into it. I mean, we need to determine whether or not that's a public beach access. I've had conversations with Miss O'Reilly. There is a document between the town and the county where most, not all, most of the streets in the town were identified, and the county says you're now responsible for them from a maintenance standpoint, which implies ownership under Florida law. We do have a couple of beach access points where FDEP has asked us for clarification. We're in the process of providing that. This will be one where we can now also look into it. And Schutz has indicated to me that he's made a note.
That's what the statutes, environmental staff. You can see both Shell Mound and Anchorage are noted with question marks, and in the comments you can see, no record in LIPA, ownership not clear.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's a great discussion and good direction. We'll move on to the next item, which is the one that everybody's been waiting for and holding their bated breath. And this is rodent and iguana control. Who wants to start out with this, Dr.?
Well, I'll just mention that I believe it was Councilor Veach who saw an article from one of the neighboring county municipalities was doing a program, and that's what kind of kicked off the iguana conversation. And then the vice mayor mentioned that many constituents were contacting her about the palm rat issue that they were dealing with, and that's what precipitated it being on the agenda today. We try to provide a little background information to help facilitate the conversation.
And I think, you know, part of the real sentient ideas here is that it was Marco Island. They have a process, and basically people, it's not like someone just goes around and finds iguanas on private property. The private property owners register if they want to allow somebody to come on a regular basis and look for easy iguanas, not ones they have to shoot, but just ones they can snag. And the other is that we're not going to get rid of them. They're around, but if there's an infestation in a certain area, then it's a way to control the population so to do less damage. I think similarly with rats, I don't think, you know, that I don't think that the town should be in the business of going into people's houses and trying to trap rats in houses. But if there's an area outside where there's a particular infestation, it seems like that may be another model that we could use. Send someone out and traps in areas where there's a significant infestation outside.
Well, notwithstanding the right of entry issue that the counselor mentioned, getting permission to go on someone's private property. So then it becomes, you know, you want us to pay for, authorize and pay for someone to perform these services or not, at 100% at the town's cost. You know, how do you envision us, is it they get the service and we just help them financially with the cost? There's a couple of different ways to skin this cat.
There is a couple ways, and I instead of reinventing the wheel, is there a way for you to sort of with neighboring communities and see what they do, so we don't have to start from scratch and think through this whole solution? I bet somebody's figured this out and is doing it successfully.
The one we have in our packet, they only allocated $20,000, which I think that's a model that seems to work well. The homeowner registers, they would let us know that there's a problem in their neighborhood, that they have iguanas, and they give us permission to enter their property.
I'm sorry, I was thinking about the rat issue, but yes, yeah.
Okay.
I've switched to rats, I'm sorry, but
My
maybe
apologies.
there's a similar model for both, I don't know. I do know there's a lot of cities are involved in rat issues and generally larger cities, but if there's some in the region that have figured out something clever on the rat front, there's no sense in us reinventing the wheel if we could figure out what they did and if it makes sense for our island, instead of just spending hours.
Right, so
figuring this out.
there's, so, you know, I don't know if the $20,000 is sort of start with that and then let us know if you run out of money and we'll go from there. And we can engage firms to help us with either or both of these issues. And use the model of, you know, people register with us, execute a right of entry to the exterior of their property. We wouldn't want to be going on the interior of their property. And you know, we'll do what we can to help address the problem through that mechanism.
It would seem to make sense to put that kind of an amount into the budget, call it a pilot program. We don't necessarily then continue it the next year, or if the money runs out, if it wasn't found to be effective. But as far as the rats, I don't think that the same model necessarily would work as for the iguanas. I'd be interested in knowing if there's anything we can look at that other localities have done, as Jim indicates, to help. Again, we're not going to get rid of them all, but we need to keep them under control. And I know we used to have a lot of feral cats on the island, and we didn't have as many rats. Now we don't have as many feral cats. I don't know if that's because Lee County Animal Services picked them all up, or what happened with that situation. I know they were doing the capture and neuter and release program, which Again, because you can never get rid of all the cats that are out there, that seemed to be a good indication. And I don't know environmentally if that's something that has worked in other communities. Maybe Chad can,
Encourage feral cats?
yeah, and I've jokingly said, maybe we could buy some rat snakes and let them loose.
Well, the funny thing is, in Monroe County, they have a lot of feral cats, and they're very protective of them. They have their own, they have iguanas and other environmental issues, but, have a lesser palm problem perhaps because of that.
I think as another aspect of that too is, and it came up in some of the document here, is that people who have a problem, a lot of times it can be partially solved by vegetation, kind of vegetation they have, some other things, maybe be able to secure their house. My experience with the palm rats is they start in the trees, get to the house, and if you can keep them down around the trees, then you have a better chance. But the one thing with rats is that where with iguanas, you can go and snag them, you really can't do that with rats. And poisoning is a real issue because you affect the birds of prey who will pick up those rats when they're hurt. There are some pretty creative rat killers out there. I was sent by some people that they're not just like a trap where you have to go out and check every day, that they will send like a CO2 to kill the rat. But then still, you're left with dead rats.
Based on all the scenarios that have been laid out so far, I'm hesitant to be on board with the town getting involved in extermination services. Where does it stop, and at what dollar amount do you stop? Further, you take care of your property. Does the town then? I'm not in favor of people just coming in, even if you sign a form. I don't know if it's a legal thing or what it might be, but just coming into your backyard to trap an iguana because the neighbor called and said they saw an iguana on your seawall. It seems to me like there's a lot of open issues that could create much bigger problems for the town. I just don't think that it's the town's job to maintain everybody's property.
And I would agree with you if we were a typical community. We are a community with empty houses for many months of the year. One of the houses on our neighborhood that became infested, there was nobody there for a year. So the rats had a place to live and spread out from.
Is there potentially a solution that town could, if there's going to be, just use the $20,000, because that's the number that's been thrown out here, to guarantee the services of a company should a homeowner need this is the company you call. I don't know how that could be structured or how it could work. I would just be really hesitant about someone calling the town and saying, I've got rats, I need you to get your guys out here to
I wasn't endorsing it for the rat issue. I was endorsing it for the
or
iguana.
even iguanas.
Yeah.
I think that
I think
the
it's a
model that
different-
I understand with the iguanas is not, Bob calls up and says, I have iguanas, come and get them. It's like on a periodic basis, once every week or two, he does his rounds. Go to the properties where he knows there are iguanas and look for them. So it's not an on-demand service. It's in a way that's economically feasible to keep the price down. So someone's not driving onto the island, for one call. I do agree rats are trickier thing because you just can't snag them the way the iguana model works.
Rats, they're in nests and colonies and so forth, So if there was a particular neighborhood that was having trouble with rats, could have a rat investigator go down there and look for the colony or look for the nests and so forth, and in town right away, the town could help out with that. I agree. I don't think we should be going into people's houses and exterminating for rats.
Nobody suggested that.
No, I know no one did, but anyhow, I do think that they could probably get a little help if there was a particular neighborhood that was infested with them.
If there's a neighborhood, the neighbors can join together and come up with a collective solution as well.
Yeah, I would like to maybe just, hone in a little bit on what the Vice Mayor was saying. If we have a particular property on a particular street that's causing a problem, if we get that address, we can try to notify the owner and say, hey, the way you're maintaining your property is creating a public nuisance, and you need to take some, proactive action to address that before it becomes a bigger problem. And we could send that person a letter to facilitate, because as the Vice Mayor said, they could be in another state and not know that they even have a problem. May not have a home watch or someone who's looking after their property when they're not here.
Should we maybe, just for the sake of argument, I'm in favor of handling the situations differently, to just, to looking at contracting with someone to start a registry of houses that are interested in having them go through and, in an economically feasible way, capturing the iguanas, because they are also invasive and they do damage. Your neighbor may have a lot of iguanas, but it can do damage to your seawall. With rats and iguanas, to work up a press release, explain to people how to control and to announce that if they want to register for iguanas, that they can do it.
Well, Jennifer has been putting out information about this already. We'll add in this other element if the council goes forward it by consensus and says they would like us to do that. We'll add that to what we've been putting out.
It maybe needs to be separated into different things. Maybe a press release about what vegetation tracks rats and iguanas, which was spelled out for iguanas in this this PowerPoint presentation that was put there. So give people specific information about what they can do to try to discourage populations from being in their
I
neighborhood.
believe Chad contacted a couple of companies that specialize in it and some tips.
Yeah.
And Chad, since you're here and you've been assigned this glamorous task, if you could check with neighboring communities like Sanibel or Marco Island, see if they've done anything clever or innovative on the rat front that we could sort of learn best practices from. I don't have the answers. I'm not an expert in the area, but it seems like somebody may have figured this out and has a practical policy that balances obligations of the citizenry and has an appropriate firewall between what the responsibilities of government are, and they figured out hopefully a nice balance. I don't know, but I'm just thinking somebody's probably spent a lot of time thinking about this, that had a rat problem.
I would agree with Jim if we could keep checking in for ideas.
Well, yeah, we can clearly, through boards, government boards that I participated in and Chad participated in, we could definitely ask that question and see if we can get back any answers.
Maybe FLC as well.
Yeah, right, Florida League of City membership and others. And I know Chad's been in touch with the environmentalists at Marco Island about their program to understand it better and how they're doing things. That's basically what you have before you today.
I wonder if raptor nest boxes would have a positive effect. Raptor nest boxes. Owls and hawks and things.
Hawks.
Yeah,
or birds.
hawks and owls and instead of feral cats.
Maybe the Wonder Gardens need some rats to feed their reptiles. Might be willing to come and do live trapping.
All right.
Iguana tails are apparently a delicacy too.
All right. Okay. Last as always is our agenda management. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to the upcoming agendas?
Like I mentioned earlier, I would appreciate putting the workforce housing initiative on next M&P or one.
I'd agree with that.
I think we agreed, at least for discussion purposes, to put the community policing concept on there as well.
Yes.
Could that be lumped in with the discussion we had on Monday about the outreach center potentially? Should it not work out at one of the church locations, discussing the potential location that we're acquiring from TPI?
I think that would definitely be interrelated, or potentially, yeah.
And put them all together?
It would also be interesting when looking at the finished design of that traffic area, because I know that the traffic is a loop, but the property line is fairly jagged, that maybe there's a spot in there somewhere that would be county owned that could be used to.
Yeah, I mean, this would be obviously a temporary solution, but
I'm thinking about after that.
yeah. Buy us some time anyway.
And last but not least, I had asked John to make sure that he offered training about sunshine to our committees, indicated that they were all invited to the training that he did at the recent nuisance meeting. And one person showed up from all of our committees. That causes me great concern because I hear things being said that lead me to believe that they do not understand the sunshine law and maybe do not understand how serious it is when they violate it. So I think one of the things we need to consider is whether we need to have a compulsory, and they wouldn't have to attend a live training, that they would watch a video maybe. Another thing I'd like to see that we've never done is when someone's appointed to a committee, that we send them a letter that says, you've been appointed to X committee, this is your next meeting date, and here's a pamphlet about the sunshine law to keep you out of trouble until you get a chance to attend a training or observe the video. I'm very concerned that.
We do. We have a pamphlet that is published by the Florida League of Cities that we send to all new appointees to all.
Must not be reading it.
Well, let's make sure they're getting it.
We are.
And then maybe a little primer on Robert's Rules of Orders too, if that's not included in that.
Particularly for the chairs, I think.
Well, they can all, everybody's a potential chair. They can all brush up on it. Okay.
Do we need to add it to agenda management to discuss whether we make some kind of video, at least a video training necessary for them? Or is that so simple we can just say, yes, John needs to?
Well, I think, Madam Vice Mayor, one of the things we may want to consider doing is people apply to be on committees, and we have a standard application they fill out. We should get them to affirm that they've watched that video or read the materials part of that application, so that we know that they know what they're signing up for.
If that would be your suggestion, we could give it a try, see if it improves things, but.
Would that be like one of the?
My advice is anything that we can do in order to ensure that all our advisory board members, as well as our decision-making bodies, are complying with statutes, in particular, public records law, sunshine law, and voting conflicts and ethics.
So, you don't want it to be one of those you agree to, like the softer terms and conditions, which everyone reads thoroughly.
Well, I mean, we could say prior to your appointment, you acknowledge that you will have to.
If there's a video online that they can just hit a button from
Yes.
home and watch that, it would certainly make it a lot easier, and way they won't have to be less than truthful to us. Okay, anything? Yes, sir.
Just one item to potentially add to next month's M&P meeting, and I famous last words, but it shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. But in part of our sort of effort to create a kinder and gentler enforcement philosophy for the town, I wondered if we could have Jason and Daphne again, and obviously you, Roger, and John, spend a few minutes discussing. And I'd like to have Jenny here as well, our PIO. I think as I look at our website and I read about a file for a permit, and the procedures are actually, it's very good, and a lot, the website looks great, but I think not only for the website purposes, but also for educational opportunity for the town, it'd be great to have your team here and talk a little bit about, and I'd love to see this on the website in a little bit more lay terms, commonly asked, first of all, mistakes people make in terms of not, who gets penalized for not having a permit most often, but also on a more positive note, what are the things, and I think we've done a nice job of laying the foundation, these permit requirements are not local, these are state requirements, and for obvious, many of them public safety requirements or purposes. I think some basic examples, because I think people are a little bit confused about what they're going to need a permit for. For example, in the landscaping space, at what point when you're doing some landscaping do you reach a threshold? Do I need to contact the town for a permit? If you're working on your kitchen, if you're putting in a new counter, at what point do I need to contact the town for a permit? Well, if I'm working on electrical issues in my home or condo and I need to replace a socket, at what point do I reach the threshold where I need a permit? I think it might be helpful just to do a little bit of a a presentation on that, and then we could have a little Q&A, and then Jenny could hear all this and hopefully then incorporate that in the website and possibly even do a press release, just to help people better understand where those thresholds are, because I think there is some confusion out there, and I'm not sure the website in that particular space addresses, it's not user-friendly from a just an educational opportunity. I think we can create just some more.
Counselor, I understand I think I understand what you're saying. You know, our problem is that when we do that sort of general information guidance thing, we sort of want to err on the side of caution that we don't want to leave it subject to, well, although I read it, and the way I read this, I didn't need a permit for X, and they really did. So we have to be very careful about that element of it. The two biggest things that we have with that is, one is, when people have scope creep, you know, they're changing their doorknob, and then they start saying, well, the new knob doesn't fit the door, so I'm going to change the door. So that's one part of it. And the other part of it is that when they call us and they say that, you know, I'm going to replace one dead rose bush, and then they wind up redoing their entire yard. So we can try to do that. I have no problem doing exactly what you're saying, but really, at the end of the day, the very best advice I can give people is contact us, tell us what you're going to be doing, and we can give you the best guidance. We're setting up having our technical staff here at least once a week in the mornings for walk-ins, for information, education. You don't necessarily have to have an application in, just make an appointment, let us know you're coming. We'll talk to you about what you're thinking about doing and what the potential requirements will be. So we're going to try to do that, but it's very hard for us to sort of put it in a matrix or something like that because there's so many variables. But we will do everything we can to put better information out there.
Premise is accepted, but even with the premise, I think we ought to at least give it a shot. The best we can under the.
We could always do better.
Under your preamble. It's not a question of doing better, I just think that's an area that I think, at a minimum, just the conversation in and of itself could be illustrative for folks and hopefully helpful from an education standpoint. That would be great, if everybody thinks is comfortable with it. But again,
Yeah, I just, we might get crowded on EMP, but we'll see. Get it on there.
Now you know what to do before your project, for your kitchen.
I just, a lot of people ask me these questions, and I go to the website, and it's just not, and I know it can't be all-inclusive.
And a little easier answer is use a certified licensed contractor. They should know when they have to get permits. So many people on the island are not.
I think he's saying if it's a real small project and they might be able to do it themselves, why bother getting a contractor?
Yeah, it's hard. So, you know, just to give you an example, you know, you get to electricity, so you want to change the faceplate of the switch. Yes. You know, do you want to change it from a switch to a dimmer? Where that line is. And we always caution people with electrical and plumbing, structural, always permits, get contractors.
And I think just this 3-minute conversation that we've all just had is we all live it, but I think for the public that could be really helpful. So to put it on the agenda and formally discuss it, again, with the caveats that you put forth, I think could be helpful. I appreciate that very much.
Well, since it's been more than a 3-minute preamble to talk about putting it on the agenda, I'm guessing that it'll be longer than 3 minutes.
I said 10, but you're absolutely right. Your caution is well taken.
No need to guess, Councilman. That's a safe bet. All right, it's 10:55, and we'll adjourn. And I'll just say, anybody at home that hasn't had their second shot and wants to get one today, the Pfizer, it's at Church of the Ascension from 1 till 5. Okay, we'll conclude. It's 10:58 or so.